Hello, good to see y'all again today. Got another drop for y'all, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I've been looking at it a little bit and going through it, and I think it's going to be a pretty good encounter. I want to thank you all for your support and everything that you've done. Uh, Sometimes you don't have a lot of support in things you do, but you all have been very supportive in bringing Hunter home and fighting for Hunter, and a lot of you all have just known us, through our social media, and you all have done so much. So I want to thank you all for that. That is very touching to me, and you all are our abnormal family, and I want to thank you so much for what you've done. And if anybody else would like to help, the links will be in the description of this video. And let's get into today's encounter. There's always something that happens in your life that you will never forget, and this is one of them. I'm 29, but at the time of this event, I was 19. It was a simple camping trip with my family and my best friend Brian. We live in a small town in West Virginia, and this scary encounter happened on a small camping spot down in the lower Glady. So this is the first time I got to bring my friend camping, and I wanted to bring someone who knows about fishing and nature. Brian was a sure pick and was one of my best friends at the time. We picked up early and we left his grandparents' house. It's only about 50 minutes or so to get to this camp spot, but let me tell you, it's in the lower mountains and far away from anyone else, or any help. Once we got there, we set up camp. Me and Brian had our own tent while my parents set up their tent across from us. Our tent, because we were living dangerous, was set up right next to the tree line with a bunch of vegetation blocking the sight from looking into the forest. The campsite is kind of in an open plot, but surrounded by trees and a nice creek for fishing. So after we set up, me and Brian went to my dad, and we tried to get him to go down and catch some rainbow trout for cooking. And this is where the first encounter happened. As anyone knows, when you are young, your parents won't believe you most of the time, and when you see something spooky while fishing, we all three kinda split up a little to cover more water holes. As I throw my spinner in the water, bam, I got a monster rainbow on the line. While I'm fighting this fish, I swear I could see the shadow of a tall figure across the creek looking at me from behind a tree. I start to look at it when my dad yells at me, "I'm coming, I have the net." Just as he says that, I look towards him and then back at the tree, but there's nothing there. After I fight the fish for a while, and we net this beauty, I proceed to tell my dad what I saw, but of course he shrugs it away and like he was nothing there, but he was more excited about the fish that I had just caught. We're back at camp, the fire is burning hot, and we are cooking up this fish up. While it's cooking, I'm in my tent with Brian, and he was telling him what I saw. Believe it or not, but he swears he saw a figure also, but behind a different tree. I was confused by this because that means there are two different creatures watching me. Brian and my dad fish. Anyways, after the chatting, we start to eat dinner. While it's getting dark out, of course, my dad brings out his American honey whiskey and starts hitting it hard. Around 11 p.m. or so, he passed out next to the fire, laying in the trunk of a tree. While my mom was smart enough to get in their tent and pass out. Of course, me and Brian were young and full of energy and wanted to stay up late. We start to tell ghost stories and, everything else, and then we start to hear branches start to break outside the tent. Just then, something gets knocked off of our table and onto the ground. I'm sitting there under my sleeping bag, shaking. Brian looks at me and says, "We gotta see what this is, bro." So we get up and we start to slowly open the tent zipper, expecting to see a possum or a coon or something like that, but wow. It's a doe, a female deer with her front legs on the table, eating our bread. So we got out of the tent, and the deer was still eating away, even though we were only feet from it. Just as I take a step, what sounded like someone knocking a freaking tree down sounds off to the right, in the woods. The deer looks up, looks at us, looks back at the woods, and takes off, Brian being an idiot as he takes a big rock from the ground and chucks it into the air and toward the woods. We can hear the rock crushing down through the branches, but just then, instead of the light sound of the rock hitting the ground, were the most horrifying scream of some creature yelling in the woods. I think he may have hit it with the rock. We look at each other and we jump back into the tent. We zip the zipper up and we get under the sleeping bags. Just as we do, we can hear branches snapping and brush moving, and I looked to Brian and said, "Oh my God, bro, that thing is coming this way." the firelight making a shadow of it on our tent as soon as it blocked my giant shadow of a creature or something through the fire. All I can see is an outline of what could be a man, but maybe 7 foot tall and with claws on its hands. I looked over at Brian and said, "Oh my God, my dad is out there asleep." As much as I wanted to be a hero, I couldn't move from the tent. All I could do was hide under my sleeping bag as I hear the table being knocked over and our food eaten. But as fast as it happened, it was gone. We wanted to look outside the tent, but we were so scared that we would end up looking outside the tent and seeing my dad shredded. We both were scared to death. Daybreak. The light comes through the tent. I immediately jump up and out of my sleeping bag and open the tent zipper. My dad is still fast asleep in the same spot and is fine. It looked like a tornado come through the camp and knocked everything over. Brian started tapping me on the shoulder as he pointed into the woods. You could actually see where something big knocked over the small dead trees. The bushes and everything was busted over, and even if somewhat of a dirty hand claw print on my side of the tent. Of course, my parents didn't believe us, and they shrugged it off as a bear or something. After we packed up, me and Brian told my parents, one second, that one second. After we packed up, we went into the woods to look at something. We were actually looking for the rock he threw, but what we found was much worse. There it lay, the doe. Its belly was ripped open, legs mangled, and head half-eaten. A bear would actually jump on the doe and on the rib cage to crack it and to get what it needed. However, this was just shredded, ripped apart. Pieces of this deer were up into the trees, like something had just shredded it, one arm after the other, like digging in a sandbox. This thing I'm talking was everywhere, in the trees, on the side of trees, across the ground. And then there was the rock with blood on it. To this day, we still believe the rock hit the creature and angered him, causing him to shred the deer and probably eat our food. What do you think? I'd say there's a good chance that the rock hit the creature. He also was probably looking for food, an easy way to get food, which if you left food out on the table by your tents, that's definitely going to draw in a lot of things instead of putting it up, raising it into a tree, or putting it away in ice chests or whatever and locking it into the vehicles. But I would say it smelt the food out there. It saw an easy dinner and it came up to eat. Y'all are probably pretty lucky it didn't hurt you after you did hurt it with the rock, because it probably thought about shredding you all like it did the deer. Hope y'all enjoyed this one, guys, and until next time, keep your head on a swivel and don't be something's dinner. We'll see you on the next one, guys.